Today we have a list of our top 5 most reliable motorcycles because we love riding and we don't want that ride to end, especially for any mechanical failures. And for number 5 on this list, we're going to talk about a motorcycle that we've actually gotten to spend quite a bit of time with, and they're fantastic bikes. They really define BMW motorcycles in a lot of ways, and this is the iconic Airhead. BMW Airhead bikes that have spanned many years, many different displacements and models have proven themselves to be fantastically over-engineered and overbuilt bikes. So it's not just the design, but also the execution of these motorcycles in their manufacturing and their overall engineering that makes them impeccable motorcycles and ones that are pretty easy to maintain so long as you understand these bikes, because the configuration is a little different from what some of us are used to. It is a boxer, horizontally opposed twin. But once you understand these bikes, they are apparently very easy motorcycles to work on and keep running for a lot of miles. And we've seen tons of these bikes that are great examples of how they hold up after many, many miles, including our good friend Brendan, who used to work here at TFL, and his father's BMW R100 that his dad rode for a long, long time, and Brendan has taken over riding, that has over 140,000 miles on it, and it still rides almost like brand new. These motorcycles can do that with pretty minimal maintenance. As far as I understand, I don't think they've cracked into the bottom end on this bike, done a little bit of top end work, and that's pretty typical of these motorcycles. So they're fantastic and also a lot of fun to ride. For number 4 on this list, I'm going to bring up a bike. This is going to be a little controversial for some people because there's a lot of folks out there that are mentally, they're stuck in those Harley-Davidson AMF days when those bikes were leaking oil on showroom floors. Not necessarily the best built things in the world. But for number 4, I'm going to put on this list an Evo engine Harley. The Evo motor, by a lot of people's accounts, is one of the best, one of the most reliable engines anyway, that Harley-Davidson has ever made. It's part of the reason that they made those Evo motors from 1984 all the way up until 2022 when the Evo Sportsters went out of production. So that is a formula that worked for Harley-Davidson for a long time. There are some issues with early, especially Evo motors. Some of those early engines had some cases on the left-hand side of the motor that would crack. A few oil leaks here and there, but especially later on in those years, the Evo motors got to be really dialed in and great, simple, rugged powertrains. Not maybe motorcycles with the tightest tolerances and the highest degree of engineering and technology and everything, but they're simple, they're rugged, and they can take a lot of punishment. You can really take whatever you throw at them. And I know because I owned, lived with, and rode many miles for many years on a Sportster with an Evo motor. That was a great engine, and it required very little, just basic maintenance, the occasional oil seal. Yeah, it's a Harley. But it was an engine that would go for a long time, and these are great platforms for you to build a solid bike out of. For number 3 on this list, I'm going to bring up a bike that's going to be considerably less controversial for a lot of people, because some people would say this list could just be Honda this and that, right? Honda is known for engineering great motorcycles, and that's maybe never more true than with the Honda Goldwing, because the Goldwing is in a lot of ways their flagship bike. It's where the most features, innovation, design, and engineering and quality goes. Goldwings are meant to be as good as a motorcycle can get, at least this sort of motorcycle, because it is a big, hefty touring bike, but they can go so many miles. If you see a Honda Goldwing with 30, 40, 50,000 miles, doesn't signify the end of that bike. It's still got a lot of life left, most often. Very well engineered for high miles, whether you get an early 4-cylinder Goldwing or a later 6-cylinder. There have been a few issues with some of these bikes over the years. Some stator issues on some of the 1200s, some charging issues on some of the 1500s, some frame weld and apparently cooling issues on a few 1800s. But for the most part, they're very, very solid bikes, and a lot of people say everyone eventually ends up on a Goldwing. There may be some truth to that. For number 2 on this list, look, it wouldn't be a list about durable bikes if we didn't mention the KLR650. It's legendary for maybe nothing more so than being a punishable bike that will just come back for more. There's anything you can do to these, drop it on the ground, ride it over rocks, smash it into things, and they'll just keep going. That's partly because they are very simple. It's a pretty ancient design, even on current KLRs. Most people know about the famous doohickey, as it's called, which is a tensioner lever for a balance shaft. It's not a part that I've actually worked on one of these bikes because I've ridden a few KLRs, but never owned one. But apparently, doohickey, especially pre-2008, that's mostly where that issue lies. Post-2008, not as big of an issue, and it's an issue that can be remedied as well. And supposedly between 2008 and 2010, there were some oil consumption issues that can also be remedied. But in general, they're durable bikes. It's a simple old school formula. And because of that, they haven't changed this bike much over the years, over the generations of this motorcycle. From 1987 onwards, they've stuck with a lot of the same because it just works. Now, it's also worth mentioning the XR650 Honda and the Suzuki DR650 because those are also very solid bikes and also lighter and more athletic. But the KLR is pretty iconic for its durability. For number one on this list, I'm going to bring up the bike that, for a lot of countries and a lot of populations, defines motorcycling. And it is none other than the Honda Super Cub, because the Super Cub is the best-selling, not only motorcycle, but the best-selling motor vehicle in the world, with over 100 million sold as of 2017, and they've sold quite a few more since then. So these bikes are everywhere, and because of that, parts are affordable and available. Knowledge is out there. It's not that hard to find somebody that knows how to work on a Super Cub. These are easy bikes to ride, easy bikes to maintain. They're very simple, compact. It's an air-cooled single cylinder. If you get into an older Super Cub, it's going to have a carburetor. And of course, there may be some adjustments that you have to make here and there. These bikes aren't maintenance-free. If you get a newer Super Cub, there are some more electronics at play, a few things that could potentially have issues over time. But in general, these are still very well-built bikes because these are affordable, entry-level motorcycles, smaller and simpler, doesn't mean that the build quality or the engineering or the execution of anything on it is bad. They are built to Honda's standards, just like what you would expect. And yeah, it's kind of no surprise that there's a couple Hondas on this list. Not to say that Hondas are, free of any maintenance. I've got an engine taken apart from one of my Hondas right now, and that's not just for fun. But there is one more Honda that I want to mention in a list of honorable mentions. That would be the CT70. It's a motorcycle we've spent a lot of time with, and these are great. It's not much of a motorcycle. It's literally a very small, arguably a kid's dirt bike, but they're so simple, just like the Super Cub. These actually use a magneto, so you can run them without a battery, and they're really easy to keep running. They're awesome bikes, and actually fun bikes to work on because, once again, everything is so small, so simple, so cheap and easy that it's hard not to enjoy it. I also got to mention the BMW K75. A lot of people would put that on their list as well, and they are pretty solid tourers. But I wanted to add onto this list Yamaha's CP2 powered bikes and that platform, because I've seen some of these bikes at some really high miles, specifically one owned by a guy named Long Haul Paul, who does something really cool. He is riding these bikes to raise awareness for MS, which is a condition that he has, and that doesn't make it any easier to do what he does. The bike that I interviewed him about and that we looked at in person was a 2021 Tenere, so not that old, and he had 170,000 miles on it at that time, which was also a year or two ago. So he's ridden many, many more miles since. What he does is incredible. So it's 100% worth checking out Long Haul Paul, because he not only talks about bikes with a lot of miles, but actually puts lots of miles on bikes in a way that very few people can. What he does is superhuman. So there's tons of really solid motorcycles out there, some that I'm sure I haven't mentioned on this list. So I'd be interested to know in the comments below what are some of the motorcycles you all would say are the most reliable of all time? I definitely hit the ones that stand out to me the most after having interacted with a lot of bikes, because I'm lucky to do this job, and seeing a lot of different machines that people ride. And if you ride a lot, there's something worth keeping in mind. If you ever have an incident on your motorcycle or even in your car, then I highly recommend you talk to Scott and the team over at Rider Justice. We work with them because they love working with bikers. They love helping people out. And you don't have to be based here in Colorado, where we're based and where Scott lives. You could be anywhere in the country, and they work with people all over. And that's a fantastic resource to have, especially if you're putting down a lot of miles, because ultimately things can happen. So make sure you check out Rider Justice using the link below. And once again, tell me about what bikes have been the most reliable for you. People are going to hate to hear it, but my Harley was pretty solid. That's all for this video. We'll see you next time.